with the big show out of the way and no Persona to talk about, I think it's time to end this year on a good old ranking list. So today I'm going to go through every game I played in 2024 and rank them from worst to best. Before we get started here, I want to add this little section. This section here is for the games that I didn't feel like I got deep enough into to give them a solid rank, or just didn't get a chance to play enough of yet. You might see these in future ranking videos, but these are the ones that I am not giving definitive rankings, but I have played this year. Also, to be blunt, this is my list. You don't have to agree. I hope you understand that this is my experience with these games, not yours. So you may have had an entirely different experience, you might have enjoyed it a lot more, or liked it a lot less. That's fine. It's all opinions. Opinions are not objective. But I also don't think that I played any particularly awful games this year. I want to stress that even though this is a worst to best list, the worst does not mean bad. So now let's get on. Coming in at the lowest ranking on this list is Content Warning. Conceptually, this is a fun game. That said, the reason this ranks at the very bottom of this list is because it did not work when I played it. This game came out April 1st, it was given out for free to a lot of people, and maybe the things changed down the line with patches, but the number of times the game failed to extract videos was astoundingly common. And initially I thought maybe it was my fault, because when I was playing with my friends, I thought that clipping half-second moments would be funny, and because it's an algorithm, like you want to make content, so I'm like, oh, short-form content, everyone loves that, and I hate making short-form content. So here's just snippets of random stuff, and I thought it was just overloading the game's ability to extract the video, but eventually we got to the point where we were doing regular recordings, and we would keep getting the failed to extract error, which kind of defeats the purpose of the whole game, because you're supposed to, that's half the game, is the video at the end. So yeah, overall, not super impressed with this game. Didn't have a lot of fun by the end, and probably not even really worth slotting into this list, but here it is, and it was truly disappointing overall. Like I said, maybe it got better down the line, maybe you didn't have these extract video failures, but I did, and it was not satisfying at all.
When the wuthering waves subside.
I've kind of already said my piece on this game. I don't believe that Wuthering Waves hasn't evolved since I left those shores. I've heard that things have gotten better, but it feels like the game is trying to push its cool factor. By that I mean that it has really cool cutscenes, it's got some pretty good combat system animations and feedback, but the story for me in 1.0 was just flat. I felt like it was a lot of push for moments that needed a lot more build-up to feel earned. Because that's one thing that you'll find about me when it comes to criticizing stories, is that there are some really cool moments in a lot of stories and a lot of video games, but they need to feel earned, because you can't just have a cool moment, expect me to be wowed by that, and then forget that a lot of this stuff is missing build-up. It's missing characterization for these characters who are appearing now. What is the point of having your characters all come together when I haven't met half of them or interacted with them for at least 30 minutes. And also, the game kind of launched a few months too soon, which was messy to say the least. But as I said before, it's been a long time since I've departed from this game, probably about 6 to 7 months now, and I don't think I have any intention of returning. If it's better, I'm glad. If not, then it's not really my concern.
Huh? Wait, for real?
Funny how these two line up. This is another game I've already said my piece on. But SMT5 Vengeance is a very fun game with incredibly solid gameplay that feels like it's lacking a bit in the story department. This game is still good. Like I've said, it's not a bad game. I feel like people call a lot of things bad now, and if you think that they're bad games, there's kind of a chance you haven't actually played what a bad video game is like. There are a lot of good ideas here. But like another game with multiple routes, without playing both, if not all the routes, you will lose out on important details. I understand wanting your players to experience both stories. That makes sense to me. but it sure feels like we're at the point where branching paths in narratives of big, long JRPGs tend to only hurt the overall plot and execution of the main narrative. Sure, there's deeper analysis to SMT5. You could probably come up with a way to make this plot actually decent. But for me, it doesn't feel that focused on the story, and it still feels like it's trying to push that focus. There are a lot of things that happen off-screen on the new route that happen on-screen on the old route. So they're expecting you to play both. But as standalone routes, it doesn't work. I just don't think it works that way. SMT5 Vengeance is still a good game. It's a lot of fun. The exploration's great. The combat's great. But the story, man, I can't get over that. I'm just not satisfied with it.
One can't discuss the planet of festivities without mentioning the watchmaker.
I struggled profusely to find the words to describe my feelings about Star Rail. Penacony was solid, but man, does this game take a long time to do the story content for. Now, I'm not saying it takes a long time for them to produce story content. No, they're dropping a big main story every single patch. But a lot of these are 5, 6, 7 hours each, and I have trouble finding the time for that in between everything else I have to do. And I'm honestly not really sure why I'm not finding it fun. After I finished Penacony, I wasn't interested in the Lawfu, and that resulted in me stepping back from the game for 2.5 and 2.6. I've since completed the 2.7 story content, which admittedly is okay, but I'm honestly incredibly indifferent to Tingyan, especially the Resurrection. So I'm in this weird spot where it feels like the game just cannot get me to care about things that I'm supposed to care about. I don't even think it's that the game hasn't particularly evolved in a favorable sense. It's just that maybe it's just not for me. But it is what it is. Star Rail isn't a bad game. It's just a time-consuming one when it comes to the core content. Also, I personally like to play my games and not just put them on auto and walk away. Squirrel with the Gun is a fun and silly kind of game. It's a simple collect-a-thon where you play as a squirrel with a gun. It's got some neat ideas like using the recoil on guns to cross platforms, and has a fair share of neat moments. It's basically the kind of indie game that's silly, it's a little bit of a meme, and it does what it needs to do. Nothing more and nothing less. I was pretty happy with the absurdity of all of it because the concept itself is absurd in that sense. So, I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about this game. It was a lot of fun. Not the best game I played this year, and certainly not the worst. I was hyped for this game for years. And then they decide to launch it one day before Persona 3 Relink. Relink is another very fun game, a lot of fun gameplay, narrative falls incredibly flat. I'd argue probably flatter than any game I've listed here. The game itself is a blast to play, and it isn't any higher because I just didn't have time to play it. I wasn't able to revisit this game until after I finished P3R, and by that time my friends were already fully geared and fully grinded, which means playing the game was just not very engaging for me. On top of that, a personal gripe, there's not much variety to the monsters in this, mostly because this is Cygame's first big AAA game. There's a lot of budget that would have had to go in to make more monsters, and I just wish there were more updates down the line. But I don't think the game did well enough to warrant that. It did good. I mean, 1 million copies in 3 days is not bad, but not incredibly impressive by video game sales standards, especially nowadays. I'm not surprised we didn't get more updates, just disappointed, I guess. I hope next time, assuming Cygames continues to make Relink-esque games, they can release their game in a less busy year or less busy time of the year, and not one day before one of my most anticipated JRPGs. Because this was rough. I revisited Code Vein this year. And if I had to go and put it anywhere on this list, it'd be here. You can see my full thoughts in the review because I don't feel like talking about and rehashing everything I said about this game. It's good. Story doesn't really hold up entirely, but I hope we get a sequel somewhere down the line, because I don't know what Shift's been working on for the past, how many years has it been? 5 years, so we'll see. This or God Eater, but I just want one of them back in the near future.
That's a pretty fatalistic point of view.
15 years ago, when I first played Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, as it was called back then, I loved that game. And revisiting it as this remake, in its full HD form, is a real treat. It holds up pretty well in a world where, at the time, we were pretty devoid of Mario RPGs. Last year, Alpha Dream had shut down already. Paper Mario was still off doing whatever it was doing, and that was really it for Mario RPGs. So getting this game back again meant a lot. Now I finally got around to finishing it this year, and it's a pretty satisfying remake with all its updated visuals, its new cutscene attacks. It's great. But I think the platforming is still kind of wonky. Actually, I think it feels a little more wonky. I think because maybe it's the visual style, it just doesn't totally feel as good as the original did. But still, it's just as fun and charming of a game as I remember.
That shit look crazy.
What the fuck? Our world is nothing like Pokemon at all. Or maybe it is a little bit. I think really only the core mechanic that this game really takes from Pokemon is the Arceus catching style. The rest of the game is more akin to Minecraft and survival games, if anything at all. You collect resources to build your base, and collecting pals to enslave is certainly a part of that. It's definitely the kind of game I think Game Freak could pull off if they were given the green light and also the actual time to make these games. Sorry to tangent off here, but I think Pal World, at least in the form I played it back in January, was not that complex of a survival crafting game, and managed to be incredibly fun and engaging. Pokemon could easily do something like this, but God forbid we give developers a realistic dev cycle for them to actually make a good game, right? Here's the thing, I talk about calling developers lazy a lot, and how I don't think that that's right. And Pokemon is a great example of that, where you have a world, we live in a world, where video games, especially high-quality AAA games, take almost anywhere between 4 to 6, now even 7, 8 years to make. How fast does a Pokemon game turn around? If we look at the time cycle for Sword and Shield and for Scarlet and Violet, it's 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years compared to a 4 to 5 to 6 year cycle, that's almost half the time. And you could say, well, they could throw money at the problem. They should hire more developers. There is only so much you can do by putting more people on a project that will get more done. At the end of the day, the thing they need is time. And the Pokemon Company, or Game Freak, or Nintendo, or all three, I don't care who it is, not giving them the time to work on the games that they need. I have a sliver of hope for ZA, but I want to point out, it's only been 3 years. By the time January comes this year, it's only been 3 years since Legends Arceus. Do you really think that ZA is going to show that much of an improvement when it's got maybe 6 months of extra work? It could, but I'm not counting on it. Anyways, back to Pal World. I think the biggest downfall of this game is that the battle system is kinda I know it's in early access and things really could change, and I hope they have, and I hope they do continue to change. But it just kind of misses the mark for me. It's serviceable, especially with the rideable pals, but the overall system just lacks some variety, and in some ways it lacks some control over what your pals do. The rest of the game is pretty standard for a survival crafting game. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's good fun with friends.
Oh, I don't think we can go this way. We can go around.
Oh yeah?
Oh.
You're right. Funnily enough, I did actually wind up replaying Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree this year, to an extent. Now you might be wondering why this is kind of in the middle of the list, and honestly, it's because I got pretty close to the end game, and I just kind of stopped. Really, I just ran out of motivation and time to play the game. There's a lot of stuff coming out around the time Shadow of the Erdtree dropped, and I would have to keep putting the game down to pick it back up to play games that were more relevant to my channel, were more relevant to my interests. As I've said before with Elden Ring, it really is my first real Souls-like, and it's great. It's just not my favorite genre of game. It is a huge and phenomenal expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, that is. And for FromSoft, it's another huge achievement on their pretty much golden record of video games. New weapon types, new spells, new bosses, everything is pretty much really well crafted and super detailed. It's not the most visually amazing game, but you get what I'm trying to get at. I don't really have any buts here. It's genuinely really good. But again, I just kind of ran out of steam by the time I was hitting the end. So it's good, but I just don't have as much to say about it. Oh goody, guess who's putting Genshin Impact higher than some very highly critically acclaimed games? Again, let's reiterate, this is my list. I will like games that I like. I've already established this in the past, but I actually like Genshin. I think it's a very solid game with a good amount to do when you want to have a game to play. It doesn't demand a lot of your time, and those 10 minutes I spend doing my dailies is honestly pretty satisfying. Even if I get dirt, it's still okay and it's fun. And despite the fact that I'm not going to get to finish Natlon's main story quest this year because it's not finished until like the patch comes out literally New Year's Eve or New Year's Day or something like that, I think Genshin continued to uphold the quality I expected from it this year. Now in a vacuum, Natlon's current main story is not as interesting to me as Fontaine, but I feel like it's setting up a lot of bigger things rather than the story itself being big, if that makes sense. I do a lot of it, that makes sense. But essentially what I'm trying to say is that Natlon's story is good. I don't think it's as good as Fontaine, in my opinion. But I think part of that is because it needs to start setting up for the bigger stuff in a more focused way than Fontaine needed to be. Fontaine is kind of like the bridge between that, where they do set up a few interesting things here and there, but it's not like the main focus. Natlon has a lot bigger of a focus on the Abyss, so it's going to focus more on these things that we need to know about. Either way, I get the feeling Natlon's main story will grow on me as we continue to expand and explore the world of Teyvat. But as per gameplay, I think Hoyo has done another stellar job at differentiating explanation, indwelling in Saurians for movement options, and the new puzzles that come with that really lets them get a bit more creative with things, lets them add more movement options. That's always really cool. In an exploration-focused game, having movement options is very important to me. There's so much variety, and it just keeps things fresh. It's, again, incredibly impressive that Genshin has managed to hold my interest for so long, and I hope it continues to do so.
New countdown, 4, 3, 2, 1 now.
Hoyo's most recent release is a new action game. While Zenless Zone Zero has the slowest story of the 3 major Hoyoverse games, at least in my opinion, I think it still is interesting. The true test is whether it can keep engaging me with the next year coming up. The gameplay, similarly to Wuwa, is a lot about satisfaction. Sound design and feedback from performing actions properly play a huge role in making this game as fun as it is to play. It also helps that the game gives me what I wanted the most for free. Though as an aside, I do kind of miss Villy's voice direction from the beta. Kind of weird that they changed it between closed beta 3 and 1.0, but here we are.
Whoa, whoa! Hey, what's with the swinging? You almost cut me!
Either way, this game's a lot of fun. tiering system still sucks, but hey, it's a gacha game. That's the way they kind of all are. Other than that, Zenless Zone Zero has given me no reason to dislike it as of right now. While I do think that 1.4 is not perfect, this pretty much ending the current main arc as we go into a new chapter of the story, I think it still does a lot of things better than some other gacha games did this year.
And I think overall, I just found it more enjoyable than Genshin and Star Rail this year.
Atlas and Vanillaware present the rebirth of tactical fantasy RPGs.
Somehow I keep forgetting to talk about Unicorn Overlord, and I forgot to write it into the script, which I don't know how that happened. Anyway, Unicorn Overlord is a fantastic game with a kind of okay story. Definitely not my favorite story of this year. It's pretty generic on that front, but I think the gameplay makes up a lot for it. There's so much customization, and it's a really deep gameplay system, especially for a strategy game where that kind of stuff is very important. I had a lot of fun playing this game. It's just kind of a shame that it came out in between stuff again. You know, comes out. P3 Reload just finished that. I'm like, wow, here's Unicorn Overlord a month later. And then I can't play Grand Blue Fantasy Relink because it's like sandwiched in between these games. And then Dragon's Dogma 2 came out, which is another game I didn't get to play that much of. So here we are, Unicorn Overlord. Fantastic game, a lot of fun. Wish it came out in a year where I didn't have as much to play because I didn't get enough time to really sink my teeth into all the systems the game had, all of that interesting stuff that would have made my experience really cool. I might come back to this game down the line in order to do that, but I don't know. The magic of having a really busy year for games is that I don't have time to sit down and take my time with all these games. So, fantastic game. Okay story. Likeable characters. Hope Vanillaware keeps making stuff. Hope they stop, going over budget. Or maybe keep doing that because you keep making really good games with it. I don't know. All I can say is Unicorn Overlord is pretty damn good.
Well then, I wish you a safe journey.
Many, many years have passed since I said that Persona 3 Remake was a when situation, not an if situation. Actually, that was before I even started this channel. I've been saying that for a very long time. I got no proof besides text, so I'm not going to show that here because who cares. Anyways, as someone whose main complaints about the original or the gameplay, Persona 3 Reload is pretty much exactly what I wanted. The story is great, the characters are great, the music is great. I really don't have any major complaints. The only real big complaint I have is that I do agree that rewriting some of Episode Aegis, there's some dialogue that's either missing or altered to make the characters less abrasive. And I don't know. I don't totally agree with that decision. Anyways, I think arguments can be made about the preservation of older features and the visual identity of the game. But I also want to stress that all the versions of Persona 3 can coexist without us acting like everyone has to pick a specific one or that one version is awful and an affront to God. People have gotten extremely aggressive about their opinions, and I personally think that that's kind of a bad thing when it comes to something as trivial as which version of a game you should prefer to play. Like what you like, I liked Persona 3 Reload. It didn't surpass my love for Persona 4 or 5, but it's amazing nonetheless. It has some of the highest highs in the series with some of my favorite social links and some of my favorite moments in the story, and it has also some of the lowest lows with one of my least favorite social links ever, and just, I have some issues with the way Episode Aegis goes. I think the amount of gameplay in there to essentially make up for the $30, $35 you're spending for it is, a bit much for the amount of story you get. You basically get 20 to 25 hours of gameplay and 5 hours of story. Which wouldn't be bad if it was a full Persona game, but it's not. Maybe that would still kind of be bad if it was a full Persona game. I don't think they can really tell their stories that quickly. Anyways, from my point of view, Persona 3 Reload is a remake of Persona 3 made for Persona 5 fans. And that's not a bad thing. It's really not. That's genuinely what a lot of remakes are for. They're for the newer fans, and hopefully the older fans can appreciate it, but sometimes that doesn't work out, because sometimes the older fans do like the older versions better. And that's fine. Like, we don't need to have a big argument about which one is better and which one's worse, and you don't gotta go say that, oh, this one's dog shit, and this one's amazing. Oh, you should love Reload because it's the new one's always better. You should love the old one because it's the original creative direction. You have no choice but to love it. If it wasn't for that one, then Reload wouldn't exist, which is probably true in some regard. But the point is that just like what you like. It doesn't need to be a big argument. You don't need to be so aggressive about our opinions. You can accept that someone likes Reload over the original. That someone likes the original over Reload. It's not a big deal. It's a video game. Who cares? I figured it out. There's a chroma key filter on the whole scene. I don't know why that was there. This one slides in as one of my favorite games from my childhood. Mario RPGs aren't known for their deep and complex stories or their incredibly well-written characters. At their core, honestly, the main driving force of these games is the witty dialogue, funny moments, and the core gameplay. The Return to Thousand Year Door is a glorious one, though I do admit that I did enjoy Origami King when I played it, like 4 years ago. Thousand Year Door still stands tall as my favorite game in the franchise. The visual upgrades the remake receives are much more subtle than your average remake. The characters emote more. There's like noise when they talk. You know, it's not voice acting, I don't think, but it's there. The soundtrack, the battle themes, the main battle themes, you get one for each area. It's really cool. I have to say that I still love this game a lot, even with all the backtracking and pretty much basic story beats. And the difficulty is not that high at all. There's a part of me deep in my heart that will always be willing to come back to this game, despite its flaws. So, thank you, Nintendo, for bringing back Thousand Year Door. Even if it is the last time we see Paper Mario in this form, I'm still glad that they at least tried to revisit it again, even if things don't pan out to them working on Paper Mario in this way again. But it looks like the future is bright. I mean, we got a new Mario RPG with Brothership, we got Thousand Year Door, and we got Super Mario RPG Remake. It feels like they're kind of pushing towards this idea, so we'll have to see.
Initializing Iconoclastic Defense System, Omega-1.
What the hell is an iconoclastic defense system?
All the weird controversy surrounding Final Fantasy XVI was a little bizarre to me. It just makes me feel like every Final Fantasy game is just going to be controversial from now on. As someone who didn't buy a PS5 when this game came out, this was my first time being able to play this game. And I was skeptical of the criticism that the game was not Final Fantasy, mostly because I don't know what that means. Every single person seems to have a different explanation for it. Oh, it's not turn-based. Oh, it's not whatever. I don't know. Honestly, I didn't read too much into it because I kind of don't really care. Final Fantasy XVI wound up being one of my favorite games to release this year. The narrative is very powerful and thought-provoking, and it's the kind of story that keeps you wanting to know what happens next. At the same time, the side content is very engaging. It doesn't feel like they made side quests for the sake of making side content. There are actual stories tied to almost all of these side quests, which is great. It just makes it feel also well thought out and well crafted. I say that a lot, but damn, this game is good.
It's time to find out who we are, once and for all. Show yourself, Ifrit.
16 is not a happy game, though. They don't really even give you a lot of chances to be smiles and sunshine. You'll get a glimpse of that before the writers rip it away from you, and it fits the status of the world in this game. There are tons of big set pieces and cinematic moments that they know what to do with, which is super important for a lot of these games. There are so many games out there that I've played that have all these big set pieces, grand ideas, and the execution is like, it's alright. I guess we can do that, kind of thing. To me, there isn't an ounce of wasted effort here, and the overall game just had me in awe, and perhaps left me feeling a little bittersweet by the end. In 2018, I purchased the reboot of God of War. I guess soft reboot of God of War. Despite the fact that I hadn't played any of the previous games. I did also know a good chunk of Kratos' story, and by all accounts, every piece of 2018 should have appealed to me back then. A strong, compelling narrative, satisfying real-time action combat, and complex characters. The ingredients were all there for a perfect game for me, and I couldn't get into it. I reached the end of Alfheim, and I dropped the game. Coming back to God of War 2018 at the beginning of this year was my test to see if this game was actually up my alley. I mean, all the pieces were in place, and for some reason I couldn't get into it. But with new perspective and maturity, it all finally clicked. Now, I technically should rate these as separate games, but Ragnarok is pretty much a true sequel in the sense that I feel like now you can't play Ragnarok without having played 2018. You can play 2018 without having played the previous God of War games, because while it is continuing off of that part of Kratos, as long as you get the general gist of who Kratos was, you kind of understand why all of this is so significant to him now. So basically what I'm saying is that as a package is how I'm going to rate these games, is how I'm going to talk about them. 2018 opened the door to introducing the series in a brand new light, and the team behind it clearly had a ton of ideas for Ragnarok, and it shows. There are things set up in 2018 that are perfectly put into Ragnarok. Like, it's so obvious that this was kind of planned out in that regard. Anyways, I can't in good faith put these two games apart because you cannot have the emotional payoff of Ragnarok without the build-up of 2018. They're both cinematic masterpieces and absolutely amazing displays of the team's talent and efforts. The tension you feel in the story, the emotions, the highs and lows, and the combat is satisfying with flashy skills to boot. It's not the most complex gameplay system you're ever going to have, but it sure feels good to play. That said, since I was much more engaged with Ragnarok and wound up playing a lot of the side content in that, some of this stuff does not always totally feel thought out or fun. The Muspelheim trials are definitely a fun idea if you like the no damage challenges and stuff, if you like doing that, but I kinda hate that stuff, so yeah, I didn't like that. And then some of the side content bosses feel like bullshit. I'm sure it's partially skill, but god, that one where you fight like 3 bosses at once, that doesn't click for me, man. I don't think the game has the setup to make that fun. In some games you fight multiple bosses and it's not fun. And that's the kind of one that I felt like Ragnarok was, is that most of the multiple boss fight things are just not that engaging. I didn't like them. I don't like the strategies I have to use to beat them. So yeah. Also, finding your way around can be a bit annoying because the map markers usually point you in the direction you're supposed to go, unless the direction you're supposed to go is through the fast travel system. Then it just points you to the fast travel system and don't even tell you where to go from there. I'm like, just show me the way to walk. I don't care if it takes longer for me to walk. Just show me how to walk there. I'm not going to go through the stupid door between realms and whatever. Just show me how to walk there. Anyways, and those strong points just really override the bad and the negative that I have. And that's kind of also the power of a story I really enjoyed and got into.
That gear. Looks like it would freeze.
Thanks, Atreus.
What is that?
Dead.
Thanks, Kratos.
Above the door. There's a light crystal.
Thanks, Atreus.
We don't have the equipment for this.
Shut up.
My arrows can't go through walls, I'm afraid. Together again. You won't believe it, Mindy. This crest...
Chucking spears at... Shut up!
Bro, it's not doing DPS.
Thanks, Atreus. I just figured that out.
And the Game Award goes to... Metaphor.
I think it was pretty obvious that Metaphor is going to be my game of the year. As someone who really only tuned into Atlas games since Persona 5, it's been an adventure of ups and downs with them. There are games that I liked, games that I really liked, and games that I didn't finish. And there are games that I didn't like. Atlas is far from perfect, and that's okay. Metaphor was a game I wasn't actually incredibly excited about, if I'm honest. I'm not super interested in this type of setting, and I was worried that we'd essentially get Persona, but it's fantasy. And even though it kind of is a little bit, I think Hashino showed up and did pretty much prove me wrong, once again. Metaphor is incredibly reminiscent of Persona in a lot of ways, but stripping down the game to its bare components isn't always the best way to describe an experience. In a lot of ways for me, Metaphor feels like it actually enhances and changes a lot of those aspects in little ways. You know, not having this set out structure that the past two, or the past Persona game had, P5, has like a structure to its social links that makes them kind of predictable, like, oh, bad thing's gonna happen here, and then rank 6 or 7, you're gonna go to Pimentos, and, you know, kind of like that. Anyways, really, despite taking a lot of elements from Atlas's franchises, Metaphor feels like its own thing. Every system really just feels like a refinement of its original incarnation, though not totally to that extent. Anyways, the characters are all great. I truly can't even pick one that feels like they lack screen time or presence. And of course, that visual style is second to none. It's beautiful. I really adore almost everything about this game, and it's hard to imagine what Hashino will do next that might even top this. I don't know. Either way, I really enjoyed Metaphor. It's a fantastic game, fantastic narrative, great RPG. Play it, or don't, I don't know. It's got a chunky demo. Might as well play that if you're not sure. But I really don't have a lot to say that I haven't already said. I know some people have told me that the game balancing also kind of sucks, so as I've said before, I'm not a good person to talk about game balancing, which is why I don't like to spend that much time talking about it. But I really like this game. It was a fantastic experience through and through, and I can't wait for about in 6 months when everyone's going to say that it sucked. Because that's what happens to literally everything on the internet. Anyways, great game. Hope Hashino does cool stuff in the future. Play Metaphor ReFantasio.
Hey, you awake?
Nope, I'm asleep. Good night.
2024 has been one of the best, if not the best year for gaming for me. It is the single year in my life where I was consistently and constantly engrossed and engaged with the game pretty much every week of the year, to the point where I was wishing that they might stop releasing games so quickly. Got a lot of stuff this year. I played like 20-something, 23 or 24 games this year. Probably more. I lost the document that I had that was keeping track of games, so I might be missing some. Actually, I think I am missing some. Oh my god. And honestly, I kind of hope 2025 slows it down a lot. I'm writing out the list of games I'm planning to play, and I'd really like a good 2 to 4 months where I can just play Monster Hunter Wilds. I've had to forego a lot of other games this year to play things that I intended to talk about on the channel. And as healthy and great as that was, you know, I love putting down games that I'm enjoying because I gotta make a video, which, you know, those are fun. I'd like to have some time just to relax. So, Happy New Year. and you guys can let me know your favorite games of this year down in the comments below. As I've said, it does not have to be games from this year. You could have played something this year that you really liked, and that could be your favorite game of this year. Because that's not how I do Game of the Years on my channel. When it's for the Game Awards, it's different, you know. Now that I think about it, this has been the first year since 2017 that I have not completed a playthrough of Persona 5. Perhaps a sign of things to come? Anyways, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more things JRPG related, mostly. As per tradition, the next video will be about my good old predictions for Atlas in 2025. So you can look forward to that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
No need. We'll just break through. It's over.